So hello, from the Open World Forum 2010. I'm here now with Moirin Shirley from the Apache Foundation. Moirin, you gave a very interesting keynote this morning.
Thank you very much.
Where you talked about some very interesting projects that bring the open source and free software ethic to humanitarian problems. Do you want to talk about some of those projects?
Yeah, so some of those projects, I think what they're bringing is more than just the ethics of open source and free software, but there are significant advantages to open source and free software in terms of the adaptability, in terms of the swiftness with which one can move, that make it ideal for crisis management software in general, whether that's sort of the immediate crisis of something like the Kenyan post-election violence or the Indian Ocean tsunami, or whether it's a more long-term crisis like the literacy problem throughout the world. I think with proprietary software, you often have these problems that you have a release cycle and you have a commercial entity perhaps, and they have their plans and they want the software to do this and that. And things can take a long time to get implemented and to get adapted if you need a slightly different use. With open source software, you have this situation where as soon as it's implemented, it can immediately be taken, adopted by somebody else, adapted for their needs, and set into use in a completely different situation.
So can you give me perhaps an example of some of the projects that are relevant in, for example, you mentioned the post-election violence in Kenya. There's the Haiti earthquake as well, is another example of a crisis where free software played a major part, right?
So the Haiti earthquake, they actually adopted the software from the Sahana Foundation, which was initially developed in Sri Lanka following the Boxing Day tsunami. And that software, because it was open source and freely available, the code was there, the code was available, everything was ready to go. It just needed to be picked up, adapted slightly for the local situation in Haiti, localized, translated, and then it was ready to go. The software that was developed in Kenya post the 2007 presidential election has been adapted for things as completely diverse as, monitoring and mapping where roads were blocked and where it was impossible to pass after snowstorms in North America, and monitoring, pharmacy stocks and supplies of these vital drugs across many countries in East Africa. Like, it's simply inconceivable that a proprietary software product could be so very flexible, so very quickly, and at no cost.
You also mentioned the literacy problem and some of the projects that are trying to address that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
So literacy is a massive issue. Some of the other keynotes talked about it in the Brazilian context, but it turns out that 1 in 5 adults across the globe doesn't have basic literacy skills. We're talking is not able to read or write their own name. And that's a huge problem, from everything from civil involvement to just basic life skills, being able to read the instructions on the packet of seeds, being able to know when and how you should apply the fertilizer. And so the Literacy Bridge project has come up with this device, the Talking Book, which is basically the world's cheapest and most durable and adaptable audio player. It's purely audio. There are no sort of verbal instructions. There's no writing on it. It's all icons, and icons that are as completely universal as possible, which is more difficult than you think when you're coming from a Western perspective and you think, well, of course a triangle pointing that direction means play and 2 lines means pause. That's not as universal as you would think. But the Talking Book allows people in situations where there is low literacy to easily transmit information. You can record straight onto the device. They can hook up to each other directly and transmit data from one to the other without requiring any kind of a server connection or technology there.
And can you give us an example or two of the real-life benefits that the Literacy Bridge project has brought to
So the pilot program that they ran in Ghana sent out 21 of these devices. Now, I imagine if you were to sit in the average classroom in a university in Paris, you'd find more than 21 audio players, just look in people's pockets, and everybody has a phone and an iPod and so on. Sent out 21 of these devices to a village of 110 households. And across those households, those devices were shared out on a I have it for a week, then I give it on to somebody else sort of a basis. They saw in a year where other farmers in the locality were seeing 5% decrease in crop yields, the users of the talking book were seeing 48% increase in their crop yields. And you can see from the pictures of it, there are these where they haven't used the talking book or the information that they've gotten from the talking book. Because, of course, if some foreigner comes into your village and says, here, I've got this great thing that's going to teach you how to increase your crop yields amazingly, like, that's a great promise. But this is your life. This is the life of your family. And so a lot of the farmers tried it out on part of their land. And you can see where the crops that were grown by the traditional methods, side by side with the crops that were grown with this new advice and using the information, the best agricultural practices that were available, it's just a huge increase in what you can do with exactly the same tools, exactly the same fertilizers, exactly the same, like you'd no need for GM seeds. It's all there. It's just about having the knowledge.
That is truly inspirational. So really, free software saving the world.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much, Moirin, Shirley, and à bientôt sur Intelli'N TV.
À bientôt.